I was pruning the rose bushes in my garden when I heard the soft ping of an incoming email. I almost ignored it. I'd promised myself a quiet afternoon. Please stay with me as I tell you my story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel, for your support means the world to me. Back to my story, but something made me wipe my gloves and check my phone. The subject line made my stomach drop. Call me immediately, urgent. It was from Mr. Ellison, my family lawyer. He'd been handling our family's affairs for nearly 3 decades. Calm, collected, and never dramatic. For him to use the word immediately meant something was very wrong. I opened the message. Just 2 short lines. Margaret, please do not speak to anyone until we talk. Call me right now. The air around me shifted. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I called him instantly, but it went straight to voicemail. Then another message came through, this time a text. I'm gathering proof. It's about your daughter-in-law. I felt my knees weaken. Clara, the same woman who brought me flowers every Mother's Day, who helped plan my birthday dinner last month. A cold wave crawled up my spine. Inside, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the framed photo of my family. My son Daniel was smiling, his arm wrapped proudly around Clara. My grandchildren were laughing beside them. That picture had always made me feel safe, but now it looked staged. Every memory of her played back differently in my mind. Her overly sweet tone, the way she always redirected conversations about money, the faint irritation whenever I mentioned updating my will. Then my phone rang. Margaret, came Mr. Ellison's trembling voice. I need you to sit down. I already am, I whispered. There's something you need to know about Clara. He said, something that could destroy your entire family if we don't act fast. I froze, my hand tightened on the phone. What did she do? Mr. Ellison took a long breath. She's not who you think she is. Margaret, and I can prove it. I felt the room tilt around me. My daughter-in-law, my son's wife, had a secret. A terrible one. The next morning, the world felt strangely still. I sat by the window of my study, staring at the unopened envelope lying on my desk, the one from my lawyer. Mr. Vance, he'd called earlier, his voice tight with urgency. Mrs. Harwood, it's about your daughter-in-law. Please call me immediately. I hadn't yet, my heart wasn't ready. I thought of Lena, my daughter-in-law, the woman my son, Daniel, had brought home 2 years ago from the distant city of Avondale. From the very beginning, I'd sensed something unsettling about her calmness, that overly polished smile that never reached her eyes. But Daniel adored her, so I silenced my instincts. Now, with the lawyer's letter sitting before me, dread crawled up my spine. I forced myself to open it, hands trembling. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. Significant irregularities in the estate documents. Suspicion of forgery and fraud. I dropped the paper, my breathing quickened. Lena had been helping manage Daniel's business accounts after his accident. Could she have? No, I refused to believe it. Just then, the phone rang again. I picked up, my voice barely a whisper. Mrs. Harwood, it was Mr. Vance again. You need to come to my office today. There's something you must see in person. His tone made my stomach twist. What is it? I asked, but he hesitated before replying. It's not just about the money, he said finally. It's about Daniel, and what your daughter-in-law has been hiding from you both. The line went dead before I could respond. I sat frozen, the letter still in my hand. The truth I'd feared for months was finally clawing its way to the surface, and I wasn't sure I wanted to face it. By the time I reached Mr. Vance's office, the sun was dipping behind the towers of Edever City, casting long shadows through the glass windows. The air smelled faintly of rain and paper, a scent that always made me uneasy. Mr. Vance stood when I entered, his face drawn. Thank you for coming, Mrs. Harwood. Please sit. I lowered myself into the leather chair, my heart thudding. You said it was about Lena. What did you mean? He opened a folder on his desk, sliding a few documents toward me. These are copies of property transfer forms your late husband signed, or so it appears. But the signature was forged. My breath caught. Forged by whom? He sighed. We traced the notary stamp. It leads back to someone connected to your daughter-in-law. My hands shook as I scanned the papers. The signatures were nearly perfect, but I knew my husband's handwriting. I'd memorized it in love letters and grocery lists. This wasn't his. That's not all, Mr. Vance continued, lowering his voice. 2 days ago, an anonymous package arrived at my office. Inside was a letter from Daniel. My head jerked up. From my son. But he's been gone for months. He nodded slowly. It was postmarked the week before his accident. It seems he suspected something about his wife. He handed me the letter, sealed in an old white envelope. My fingers hovered over it, fear clawing at my chest. I wanted to open it, but something in me froze. What if Daniel had known the truth all along? What if Lena had played us both, and his death wasn't an accident after all? The rain outside began to pour. Inside that office, silence roared louder than thunder. I stared at the envelope for a long time before tearing it open. Daniel's handwriting danced across the page, hurried, uneven, as though he'd written it in panic. Mom, if you're reading this, something's wrong. I don't trust Lena anymore. She's been hiding things, calls at night, strange deposits in her account, and a man I saw her with near the old docks. Don't confront her. She's not who she says she is. My hands trembled as the words blurred before my eyes. I pressed the letter to my chest, as if doing so could bring him back, could stop the truth from bleeding through every line. Mr. Vance watched quietly, then said, "There's more." He mentioned a safety deposit box at Northern Crest Bank. He wanted you to open it if anything ever happened to him. My pulse quickened. Do we know what's inside? He shook his head. Only you can access it. I rose from the chair, the letter still in my hand. Then that's where I'm going. The drive to the bank was a blur of rain-slicked streets and headlights slicing through mist. I kept replaying Daniel's voice in my head. His last visit before his accident. He'd hugged me longer than usual. He'd whispered, "Take care of yourself, Mom. Promise me." Now I understood why. At Northern Crest Bank, the manager guided me into a quiet room and handed over a small metal box. My breath caught as I turned the key. Inside were photographs, grainy images of Lena meeting a man I didn't recognize, exchanging envelopes under dim streetlights, and beneath the photos, a small USB drive labeled "For Mom if I don't make it." My knees nearly buckled. Whatever truth Daniel had uncovered, it had cost him his life. The moment I plugged the USB drive into my laptop, my heart pounded so violently that it felt like it might tear through my chest. The folder opened, revealing dozens of files, photos, voice notes, and a document titled Evidence. I clicked the first audio clip. Daniel's voice filled the room, low, tense, urgent. "She's planning something, Mom. Lena isn't just hiding money. She's connected to something darker. I think she's using me and my firm to launder money through shell accounts. If anything happens to me, go to Mr. Vance. Trust only him." I covered my mouth to stifle a cry. My son had been terrified, cornered. The videos that followed showed Lena arguing with a man near the same black sedan that had followed me days ago. Her voice was sharp, her tone cold, nothing like the sweet, trembling widow she pretended to be. Then came the final file, a recording dated 2 days before Daniel's death. The camera pointed toward his desk, capturing his trembling hands as he whispered, "She knows I found out." The screen flickered, then went black. A knock on the door jolted me from my trance. My heart seized. I turned off the laptop and peeked through the curtains. A black car was parked across the street, its engine idling. I froze. Before I could react, my phone rang, an unknown number. I answered, my voice barely a whisper. "Mrs. Arden," a distorted male voice said. "You shouldn't have opened that box." The line went dead. The room felt smaller, the shadows thicker. I backed away from the window, clutching the USB drive. The truth had surfaced, and now, someone wanted it buried again. I stood frozen, staring at the window as the black car's headlights cut through the dusk like twin daggers. My breathing quickened. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. Then the car door opened. A tall man stepped out, dark suit, gloved hands, no visible expression. He moved with calm precision, like someone who had done this before. I quickly shut off the lights and crawled toward the back door, clutching the USB drive. The doorknob rattled. A faint, deliberate knock followed. "Mrs. Arden," a voice called softly. "We just want to talk." I didn't answer. My hand trembled as I reached for my phone and dialed Mr. Vance. "Vance," I whispered. "There's someone outside." "Don't open the door," he cut in sharply. "Listen to me, Iris. Leave the house now. Go to the address I texted you. It's safe. I'm on my way." I hung up and slipped out the back door into the night. The cold air bit into my skin as I hurried down the alley. Behind me, I heard footsteps, slow, measured, following. The USB drive burned against my palm, as if it held the weight of my son's final plea. I turned a corner, heart hammering, and spotted a taxi idling by the curb. I waved frantically. The driver hesitated until he saw my desperation. I jumped in, gasping, "Drive, please." As the car sped off, I looked back. The man stood at the mouth of the alley, staring after me, motionless. He raised his hands slowly, not in threat but in warning. And though I couldn't hear his voice, I could read his lips clearly. "You're next, Mrs. Arden." The city lights blurred as tears filled my eyes. I whispered, "Not if I find you first." The safe house was a small cabin, tucked deep within the outskirts of Briarwood Valley. It looked abandoned, but when I stepped inside, the faint hum of electricity betrayed its readiness. Mr. Vance arrived shortly after, his expression grim, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "Iris," he said, locking the door behind him, "you need to prepare yourself. The people after you aren't just ordinary criminals." He set his briefcase on the table and opened it. Inside were printed documents, photos, and a small sealed envelope. "This," he said, sliding the envelope toward me, "is what your son was trying to expose." My trembling fingers tore it open. Inside were photos of my daughter-in-law, Clara, and a man I had never seen before, a politician, smiling at a private event. Then, a letter in my son's handwriting. "Mom, if anything happens to me, it's because of her. Don't trust her smile, it's paid for in blood." The words struck me like thunder. I shook my head, unwilling to believe. "No, Clara loved him, she loved his access," Vance interrupted. "Your son discovered she was laundering campaign funds through his company. When he confronted her, she set him up to look guilty. The night before he died, he sent these files to me and to you. But the message was intercepted." I pressed a hand to my mouth, the horror sinking in. "She killed him." Vance nodded slowly. "Or had him killed. Either way, she's not done. She wants the last piece of evidence, the drive you have." I glanced at my bag, where the USB hid beneath layers of clothes. The same moment, the window shattered, glass spraying everywhere. Vance shoved me to the floor, shouting, "They've found us." Gunshots followed. The sound of gunfire tore through the cabin, each shot echoing like thunder against the wooden walls. I screamed, clutching my bag tightly, as Mr. Vance ducked behind the table, pulling his gun from his coat pocket. "Stay down, Iris," he barked, firing a few rounds toward the shattered window. The smell of gunpowder filled the air, mingling with smoke, as one of the curtains caught fire from a stray bullet. The attackers weren't speaking, just advancing, silent and deadly, through the thin walls. I could hear boots crunching gravel, then the faint hum of an engine idling nearby. They had us surrounded. "Vance will die here," I cried, choking on smoke. "Not yet," he replied, tossing me his car keys. "There's a back exit through the cellar. Go now." "What about you?" "I'll hold them off. Don't argue, Iris, go." I hesitated only for a second before crawling toward the cellar door, heart pounding so violently I thought it might burst. My hands shook as I lifted the hatch and descended into darkness. The air below was damp and cold, the floor uneven with stones. I could still hear the chaos above, shouts, glass breaking, the thud of boots, then a single gunshot that silenced everything. "Mr. Vance," I whispered, but there was no answer. Tears blurred my vision as I stumbled through the tunnel, gripping the flashlight I'd found on the wall. It led to the woods, a narrow opening covered with vines. I pushed through and ran. Branches whipped my face. My lungs burned with fear and exhaustion. Behind me, the cabin roared as it exploded, flames devouring the sky. The last thing I heard was a single, haunting echo, a man's voice shouting my name before it was swallowed by fire. By the time I reached the main road, dawn was breaking, pale light cutting through the smoky horizon. My legs trembled, and every breath felt like sandpaper. I flagged down a passing truck, the driver's eyes widening when he saw the burns on my hands, and the ash streaking my face. "Please," I whispered, voice cracking, "take me to the city." Hours later, I was sitting in a small, dim office at the police station, clutching a cup of lukewarm coffee. They told me they'd found a body in the wreckage of the cabin, unrecognizable, but wearing Mr. Vance's ring. My heart shattered. He'd died protecting me. But before I could process it, the officer handed me a brown envelope. "This came with your lawyer's letter. He said if anything happened to him, we should give it to you." With trembling fingers, I tore it open. Inside was a copy of my late husband's will, and a hidden clause I'd never seen. My daughter-in-law, Claire, was not only siphoning money from my husband's estate, she'd forged documents naming herself as a co-beneficiary. But that wasn't the worst part. Attached to the will was a birth certificate for a child born just months before my husband's death. The father's name, Richard Hale, my husband, and the mother, Claire. The room spun. My daughter-in-law, the woman who'd called me mom, who'd smiled and served me tea, had been sleeping with my husband before he died. Every kindness she'd shown was a mask, every lie a trap. My lawyer had discovered the truth, and it had cost him his life. Tears burned my eyes as I whispered, "You destroyed my family, Claire, but I'm coming for you." 3 months later, I walked into the grand courtroom of Alderidge City. the same place where my husband's empire had been built and nearly destroyed. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered, but I kept my chin high, my resolve sharper than ever. Claire sat at the defendant's table, dressed in black, her expression calm but her eyes darting nervously. The once sweet daughter-in-law who'd smiled and brought me tea now looked like a stranger. Her lawyer whispered something to her, but she didn't respond. When the judge entered, silence fell. The prosecutor began by laying out the evidence: forged documents, stolen assets, and the affair she'd tried so hard to bury. Then came the final blow: the recordings Mr. Vance had hidden in his office, now retrieved and presented in court. Claire's voice filled the courtroom. "He'll never know what hit him. Once she's gone, it's all mine." Gasps echoed through the hall. Claire's face turned pale. My hands trembled, but not from fear, from release. Years of manipulation, of pretending, of living beside deceit. It was finally over. When the verdict came, it was swift: guilty on all counts. Claire's eyes met mine as they took her away. For the first time, I saw something that almost resembled regret. But it was too late for redemption. After the trial, I visited Mr. Vance's grave. I laid white lilies beside his headstone and whispered, "We did it, you can rest now." As the wind brushed through the trees, I felt peace settle over me, not the kind that comes from victory, but from survival. I looked toward the sunrise and murmured, "Sometimes the truth burns everything down, but from those ashes, you rise stronger than ever."